Ready to go? So just want to close up on the mission drift. If you look in your book on the bottom of page 20, it says, Drucker tells us defining the nonprofit mission is difficult, painful, and risky, but it alone enables you to set goals and objectives and go to work. Unless the mission is explicitly expressed, clearly understood, and supported by every member of the agency, the enterprise is at the mercy of events. Decision makers throughout will decide and act on the basis of different, incompatible, and conflicting ideas. They will put in opposing directions without even being aware of their divergence, and your performance will suffer. So Colleen and I were talking a little bit on the break about, even like every family or individually kind of have a mission, and then the foundation of everything you do goes back to that mission. And sometimes individually you have mission drift, right? You start out with one purpose and then you change, or in a family, you've got this mission when your family is young, and then as your family matures and you mature, your mission changes. So it's not always bad, but it isn't. It's kind of the grounding force. So to me, it's like if you have a clear mission, then you always know. It's like a compass. You always know where you're going to go. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit now about community needs assessments. Okay. It says the mission statement, as we've learned, define why an agency is in business. By identifying the mission statement, the agency has acknowledged a perceived need in the community that it wants to work to eliminate. And we've seen some broad statements of outcomes in the mission statement. Broad statements are not enough to help an agency develop a strategic plan of action. Before moving to establish the activities of the agency, you must be sure that you understand the needs and resources in the community through a comprehensive assessment. So we do community needs assessment as an organization. We do it every year. We do it in multiple ways. So one of the ways that we do it is when we go to those community budget hearings, we're getting feedback from not just about MEO, but we're supposed to be looking at the whole community, and how all that ties in. Other ways we do assessment is through focus groups. We also do that through our partnerships by having meetings with partners and things like that. So on page 21 it says, what is a community? Cassie, you want to read that for us?
Most frequently, when we think of a community, we think of a group of individuals who are considered together because of the place in which they live or work. Thus, a community of place or place-based community, such as a community can be a state, a county or group of counties in a region, a neighborhood, town, or other geographically specific place. We can identify a number of other kinds of communities, including communities of action, circumstance, inquiry, interest, position, practice, and purpose.
And then it says it's up to the agency to define its community either by geographical location for which it receives funding to serve, or by specific portions of the geography with particular needs, neighborhoods with the highest number of low-income residents, etc. I know Head Start uses that when they do their community needs assessment, and then that's how they determine where their Head Start centers are going to be. They always have centers in the area of greatest need. So somebody might say, well, how come there's 4 in Kahului and there's only 1 in Lahaina or whatever? And it's because it's based on the area of greatest need. And how do they determine that? They determine that based on the list of people that sign up. So I know at one time on the island of Molokai, I think they had 4 locations over there. And then the need changed, it shifted. And some of that was when public transportation, some public transportation was introduced to that island. It gave them an opportunity to come into town. And because that's the hub of where things are happening, that became a more relevant area. Even though people lived out maybe on the east end or the west end, they were bringing their kids in because they were bringing their other children in for where are the schools. Most of them are in the central area. So needs assessment thought of as a way to identify the difference between what exists and what should be. I'm on page 22. Agencies gather information so that decisions can be made regarding priority needs to address and outcomes can be achieved. The assessment of community needs forms the link between the agency's mission and outcomes. So the CSBG work plan framework establishes a list of service categories that may be addressed by the use of CSBG funding. So these are the categories that are covered under CSBG funding: employment, education, income management, housing, emergency services, nutrition, linkages, self-sufficiency, health, services for youth, and services for senior citizens. So you see anything that where your programs might fit under any of those? A couple of them, right? Some of them, several categories your programs can. So it's not sufficient to identify the varying importance of the broad categories in a community, as it does not provide clear identification of the perceived need facing the low-income population. So let's look at the 6 goals, and then, remember that these goals represent the different population, right? So family, community, agency, right? So when we think about needs in our communities, we must see them as 3 levels as well. So is it a family, is it an agency, or is it a community need? So if we use some of these for an example. So individuals do not have high school diplomas. What would this be, a family, an agency, or a community need? Family, right? And we were talking about earlier, so family and individual is interchangeable, right? Our community does not have youth who are prepared to take productive roles as adults. Well, I think what we're doing here, though, is we're saying that the community doesn't have youth, so it becomes a community problem, right? Because we don't have enough resources. If it just said that youth do not have the skills to be prepared to take productive roles, then it becomes a youth, or it becomes a family problem, right? You see you see the difference? It can be the same problem, but it depends on how you could be problem for both. But the way this is stated is really focusing more on it's a community problem. Does that make sense? So how would you say that differently if you wanted to make that a family problem? Our youth are not prepared. Correct. Exactly. So same problem, and it does affect the youth, but it also affects the community, right? Because what happens, what do you see that when kids, one of the issues we see in Maui County is, right, they go off to college and they graduate and then they come back here? Some do, but a lot don't, right? And so could that be considered a problem, a community problem, right? Because there's not enough infrastructure or jobs or whatever to bring them back here, so it becomes a community problem. Does that make sense? Okay. Our agency needs additional funding to support dropout prevention programs. That's an agency. Because we're saying we know that this is a problem, but we don't have the funding to do it. Okay? Make sense? All right. So then we're going to do a little exercise. So look on page 24. And I'm going to have you work in groups. So you want to work in different groups, or you like your friends? Colleen likes her friends. Do you like your friends? Only because he presented, right? Okay. So it says on page 24, identify 3 issues, concerns or barriers, challenges, or other situations facing the clients in your community, and write these below using a couple of words. So use the blank papers that I gave you, okay? And then it says, be sure you can identify if it's a family, agency, or community need. So come up with 3, and then go back and number them 1, 2, or 3 in terms of what you think is a priority. So you can do that as a group. You don't have to do it individually. You can come up with a set of 3 as a group, and then number them, which you think is to you is the biggest priority. Okay? You guys okay with that? So you think we can take maybe about 5 minutes? Is that enough time? Think 5 minutes is about enough time, or you need 10? I'll check with you in 5.
Yeah.
Can you do that?
That is, so the issue is that you don't have what is why you didn't wish that be an issue.
Well, you don't want to use one word. You want to kind of like, just for clarity, so you don't want to use, just come up with one word. You want to kind of come up with a need statement, right? So you want to come up with a need statement, sort of
Addressing
we did here. And you identify if it's a family, is it an agency or a community. So come up with your need statement, prioritize. So what is a need in the community? If there's not enough, living wage jobs, or there's not enough financial literacy, or there's too much alcohol use, or whatever, I'm just throwing examples. Put that in a statement, and then identify if it's agency, family, or whatever. So you want to these are kind of examples. But this is not, it's what you think. I mean, seriously, so that's based on your opinion as a group, what do you think are the 3 biggest concerns? And then you come up with a statement. Does that make it clear?
But we don't have to address.
No. It can all be the same. It could all be the same. It could all be a community. It could all be an individual, but you still want to take 3 that you think are big problems. And that would be based on your experience of living in this community, right? You'd be able to draw on that.
Okay. Drug and alcohol use. That's 3. Resources? I mean, you could link it to employment too.
Comes up with a need. What's the need?
I think
Yeah, so that's what we're looking at, the need. What is the need?
that's the whole community, right? Because you would have all the agencies, everyone would be involved.
And then so we just expound on that.
Homelessness, yeah, so what do you want to say about homelessness?
I'm working on it.
Oh, okay, I was just, I thought you were, I thought you were finished.
Well, no, we're trying to figure out, what
What
would
is the
be-
need?
Yeah, what is the need is more than one thing.
Right, that's true. So all 3 of yours could focus on homelessness with different needs, right? Because there's more than one need to prevent homelessness.
Right.
Which these 2 cover.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Well, I sit on the Homeless Alliance and we haven't come up with a solution yet, so it's a challenge. So the need though, if you want to make this as a need statement though, yeah? So youth have a high rate of substance abuse, which may be a high rate of
But I think, well, we can stage it. I think
So, so how is that lack? We have a lack of support for that? Is that what it is? So is it community or the youth don't have enough options?
I think it would be linked to health, maybe mental.
So it is,
You know?
or
Yeah,
is it
yeah.
community?
Right.
If there
So
aren't
if
enough
you start
resources,
it, and then
the youth
the housing, I think, would almost be the
Yes.
third,
But
you know,
they probably
step,
don't have
like,
the
which
control
would,
usually.
you know, address that. So we would need,
You
I
can
guess
keep,
more
you know, for this
resources to-
exercise, keep it simple, you know, so maybe just, you know, focus on, yeah. Yeah, if you wanna, and yours is, because you're doing this, so, you know, so lack of community education on substance
Right.
abuse for
Right.
underage
community
youth or something, or something. I mean,
Right,
I'm not
right,
putting
right.
words in your mouth, I'm just trying to.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
salvation army, and then most people are addressing the whole aspect, like
Right,
you said,
right.
you house them.
And actually, you know, you maybe don't even need to say that because
What's-
it is
what's the
friendly,
root-
saying it's
yeah,
a community
so
issue,
employment
because
would
it's
be
not just
part
the
of
youth,
it.
they need to
So
be
if
educated,
you're
right, because you
initiating
know,
them
it's the
into-
parents and the business owners and the
hold the
big
job,
brothers and the
But
big
keep the
sisters
job.
and the aunties and the uncles and everybody
Yeah.
that needs it.
Never really addressed, like, we go
Right.
I mean, if you can only come up with two, that's fine, and then we'll stress out. Yeah, alcohol.
Well, three of these are all linked together.
So how are we gonna put that in the needs statement? So there, our community does not provide enough support on this.
Right,
We were
and that's
thinking
what
about
we were
this,
talking about,
yeah.
is that it's actually more than one, you can't put that in one thing.
Right.
Because I guess you could, but support would be very broad, because you would be specific to mental health, would be specific to job creation, would be specific to housing.
Well, could you say that it's, so is that a community-wide issue? So our community does not have enough support, supportive
Right.
services, to assist the homeless population. Yeah, I mean, if you want it, that, if, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but if that's what you're trying to articulate,
If you want this one.
if that's what the need is, right? What we're gonna do is take one of your need statements and we're gonna use that, we're gonna agree on the need statement that we wanna focus on, then we're gonna use that for the rest of the day to build up the rest of our logic model, so.
I will, resources for that.
folks about
That's
ready?
been rumor. That's been a fact. I know we've done it the other way. Yeah, that's a big thing. Yeah, the other story that the family, they really went back to someone with his family, yeah. If they're not.
Do you want to come up and write those
Yeah.
up there, Cass?
Yeah, it is one
Um,
thing.
Did you, everybody prioritize out of the, whatever you came up with? Which one you think is the most important? So before you do that, you want to just share what, the ones you came up with verbally, Cassie? What did you guys come up with?
Our first one was lack of community education on youth substance abuse. And then we have our agency lacks the funds to support or provide shelters for homeless individuals. And then families lack the resources to afford help.
Okay. So that you heard what her three are. What did you folks come up with?
We came up with homelessness and as our number one
Need.
need.
Mhm.
And we said our community does not have enough,
But our community does not have sufficient supportive services and resources to address the growing population of
Okay.
homelessness.
Okay. So I heard a homelessness here and I heard a homeless issue here. What was your homeless issue
that
again?
was agency.
We have both agency and families. We had agencies lack funds to support and provide shelters for individuals, and families lack resources for housing.
So that's it's family, lack resources, so that's an individual, and then it's also a community level. So out of the needs that you heard, you know what, let's, by a show of hands, maybe what I'll do, you tell me which one we want to focus on. So we have,
Yes.
lack of community education on substance abuse for youth. Any hands for that? Or agency lacks the funds to support or provide shelters for homeless individuals. Or families lack resources to afford housing. Anybody want to vote on any? By show of
For
hands.
the agency.
Yeah, I think so too.
The agency lacks funds to support and provide shelters for homeless individuals. That's what, you guys are all with that one, okay? And then you had,
Community,
so then they had, our community does not have sufficient support services to address the growing homeless population. So similar, so we kind of down to the, to two that are similar. Families lack resources to afford housing. No, I'm sorry. Agency lacks funds to support or provide shelters for homeless individuals. And our community does not have support services, sufficient support services to address the growing homeless population.
It's kind of saying the same
Same
thing.
issue.
Yeah. In a way.
I mean, ours is pinpointing shelters.
Right.
Right.
But support makes them self-sufficient, so I guess.
Right. So, by a show of hands, I'll say, this is choice one, this is choice two. Choice one, raise your hands. Okay. Well, I was thinking about this one too. It says agency lacks funds, and it's not that it's bad, but, and you wrote community first, but it says agency lacks funds to provide shelters for homeless individuals. And then I think that would bring me back to the question, is that MEO's mission to provide shelters, right? Are there other organizations in our community that provide shelters? So it's excellent because one of the things that we do also is that we try not to duplicate services. So if somebody else is doing shelters, we're not going to do shelters, but what can we do? We can partner with them to see how we can assist, and that's with like Maui Homeless Alliance. They meet every month, and it's all the people that serve the homeless population in any kind of capacity. So we're considered a prevention organization for homelessness because we get them before they get to, I mean, typically, I mean, we do have some that we serve, but typically we try to get to them before they become homeless. So we have rental assistance that we provide. So when they come, they're on the verge of becoming homeless because they can't pay their rent for whatever reason, then we help them with financial literacy, we help them subsidize their rent up to 6 months, and we wean them off of, and we do budgeting with them, so that at the end of that subsidy, they're able to maintain it on their own. So we do have clients sometimes that'll come in and say, well, how come you can't help me? And it's like, because at the end of 6 months, you can't sustain that rent on your own. So then do we just turn them away?
The case managed for a year.
Well, but if we can't help them with rental because they're not going to be able to sustain that, then we should, or we should get them into an employment and training program or something so that we can help them elevate their skills so that they can get a job that pays a little bit more money so that they can maintain that rent. Typically, the kind of clients we see are usually ones that maybe they were doing fine and they had some kind of a big medical thing, or their car broke down and they needed the car to get to work because of where they work, and that's the only option that they had. So it was, do I pay my rent or do I fix my car? So they fixed their car, so then they got behind. So we can help them kind of catch up because they show why it occurred. It wasn't just that they decided I was going to take a trip to Europe and not pay my rent. There was really, there was some kind of an event that caused that, and then we have a plan to get them back on track. Okay, so, sorry, I got off track, but I think it's all relevant. So, I think if you guys are okay, Kathy, you want to make that? And then we can sort of refine it. Feel all the eyes on her. Back of her head. You didn't have any of my fresh homemade pastries?
Fresh from her garden strawberry.
Yeah, fresh. My nose is growing. And those pastries that I made from Safeway. You know I work there part-time, right?
Homeless population.
Yeah, I think you can just put homeless population. Okay, so we're saying this is a family, what is this? This is an agency, an individual, or a community? Community. Okay, so agency does not have sufficient support services and resources to address the growing homeless population. Everybody okay with that main statement? So then we are going to our first part of the logic model after we have the mission is to identify the need. Because then once we know what the need is, that's the roadmap of how it's going to get us to the rest of that. What strategy, who are we serving, all those kinds of things will come next. Okay, so that's the basic, is knowing what the need is. And like I said, there's a lot of different ways to determine what the need is. So the process we just use, it's called a key informant survey. So you're a key informant. And why do you think that you would be called a key informant? Or why do you think that process would be called that? Right, and how do you know that information? You live. Right. And you participate in different community events and things like that, so you're aware, you read the paper, you know, so you're living in this. So do you think if somebody came from, you know, someplace else and just came here today, would they be considered a key informant?
Well, you're gonna have to be here a year, I kind of had to rely on them to, what are the needs, you know? Because you kind of get your own little world, and sometimes you don't, you know.
That's what I love about working in community action, because you know, say next year when we have this conversation with you, your eyes will be so much wider, because I just know for me personally, open my eyes. You know, like I said, going from not really knowing a lot about community action to just like looking at how all of this is, you know, intertwined. I mean, who would ever think I'd be watching public television to see what's going on at the county legislature? But why do I care? Why do I care? It affects us. And then also, a lot of times, there's needs that are identified here. If you listen to those public hearings, people come out and they talk about, you know, what the needs are. I mean, the needs range from, you know, there's infrastructure in the streets, to water issues, you know, to all of that. So when we're gathering all that information, are we going to address all of those needs? How are we going to determine what needs we address?
Well, we send out bids and mission, or our agency has.
So we'll go back to the mission. You know, is our mission to fix roads? No, doesn't say anything about fixing roads. So is it a need? Should we be aware of it? But are we going to do something about it? Unless we have mission drift. We'll go, why are we doing roads? But sometimes it's interesting because you don't understand the connection, but when you start looking at it, it is all intertwined. I know we do energy assistance. Okay, we do the low-income energy assistance program. We were installing solar water heaters, and I thought, well, why would we be doing that? Why do you think we would be doing that as an agency?
To help our community and safety more.
Well, it helps them become more self-sufficient, right? Because if you get these solar heaters or whatever on the house, then they have more money in their pocket, which helps them with self-sufficiency. So it is all related, but at first I was like, couldn't get my head around that. You know, it makes sense though, but not initially, probably, right? Okay. We're going to talk about, I'm sorry, jumping ahead of myself, page 26. Oh, I'm sorry, page 25. That's right. We talk about the customers. So who are the customers that we serve? What do they value? Looking on page 25. So Drucker, he asked that question, you know, who are our customers? And who is the primary customer, and who's the supporting customer? So primary customers are the direct recipients of the service, right? And then a supporting customer, a lot of times might be the funder, or it could be some other business that's indirectly impacted by the service. It's also policy members, could be family members, because if we're helping the recipient, a lot of times we end up helping the family, we strengthen the family. If we help youth, you know, not use drugs or alcohol for 90 days, you know, where the direct recipient is the youth, but it's still going to impact the family, right? So they're the secondary, they're the supporting customers, okay? So what does the customer value? What satisfies their needs, wants, and aspiration? Does it deliver value to the customers? So Drucker on page 33 of his book says, what does Mr. Drucker say? It says here, he says, learning what their primary, what does the primary customer value? Learning what their primary customer value led to significant change in a homeless shelter. The shelter's existing beliefs about the value added up to nutritious meals and clean beds. A series of face-to-face interviews with their homeless customers was arranged. And both board and staff members took part. They found out that yes, food and beds are appreciated, but do little or nothing to satisfy the deep aspiration of not being homeless. The customer said, we need a place of safety from which to rebuild our lives, a place we can at least temporarily call a real home. The organization threw out their assumptions and their old rules. They said, how can we make this shelter a safe haven? They eliminated the fear that comes with being turned back on the street each morning. They now make it possible to stay at the shelter for quite a while and work with individuals to find out what a rebuilt life means to them and how they can be helped to realize their goal. The new arrangement also requires to get what the customer values most. He must, what the customer values most. Before it was enough to show up hungry, but now to get what the customer values most, he must make a commitment. He must work on his problem plans in order to stay on. The customer's stake in the relationship is greater, as are the organization's results. So, how do you find out what is of value to your customer? What do you do in your programs, Melanie, to find that out?
During intake, you get to know them, and quite a while getting to know them overall, actually.
Yeah, so that's a form of a needs assessment, but it's an individual needs assessment, right? Because you're sitting down, you're doing an intake with the client and finding out what do they need, what do they value, what's important to them. And then you come up with a service plan, right? But do you create the service plan based on what you think they should do?
It's like with the client and yourself, it's an agreement between both of us. And it's made clear that throughout the whole duration of that relationship, it could change.
So what she's saying is, so they sit down and they come up with a service plan agreement that says, okay, these are my goals as the client of Melanie's program. These are the goals I want to achieve. Melanie says, okay, this is how I'm going to help you do that. And I also heard her say that the goals may change. So just because the initial goals are set doesn't mean that you don't need to go back and revisit it. Because what is of value to them may change. Maybe when they first come in that they really need to get a job. So once they get the job, okay, that's taken care of. But now, so what's the next thing that's of value to them? I think you do that in your business planning all the time. In your training and technical assistance, because you sit down, look at what are their goals with their business, and you come up with a plan of how to do that, and you regroup also, right? Sometimes they start out big, right? They have these grandiose ideas that they're going to have this huge business, and when they look at the financial forecasting and everything else, they kind of scale it back because they realize that maybe it's not, it's too much, too quick. Okay. So I think the message I get from that is, sometimes you go, well, they're homeless, so they need a bed and they need, food. But you're saying there's more than that. Ultimately, they just need to feel safe. And if you work with the homeless population, and since that's our topic, and that's one of the things they talk about is not feeling safe. Being put out on the street every morning. 6 o'clock in the morning, you've got to be out of that place, and you can't go back till the end of the day. So what do? They're just roaming the streets all day and they don't even know where to keep their things, right? They're worried. So they have to keep all their stuff on their person. Okay? Then on page 33 of the Drucker book, he says, what do supporting customers value? Your knowledge of what primary customer value is of utmost importance. Yet the reality is, unless you understand equally what supporting customers value, you will not be able to put all the necessary pieces into place for the organization to perform. In social sector organizations, there have always been multiple of supporting customers, in some cases, each with a veto power. A school principal has to satisfy teachers, the board, school board, community partners, and taxpayers and parents, and above all, the primary customer, the young student. The principal has 6 constituencies, each of which sees the school differently. Each of them is essential, which defines value differently, and each has to be satisfied at least to a point where they don't fire the principal or go on strike and rebel. So sometimes that's hard because you have competing interests, right? When you're working on project, so you have to kind of take a look at that and go, okay, so how do you get everybody on the same page, right? Everybody to agree. And we all know that's so easy, right? Colleen, why don't you read on page 25, Drucker question 3. That where it says Drucker question 3, what does the customer value? Oh, just read that.
Okay. The question, what do customers value? What satisfies their needs, wants, and aspirations? Is so complicated that it can only be answered by the customers themselves. Nonprofit leaders tend to be convinced they are doing the right things and are so committed to their cause that they come to see the institution as an end in itself, rather than asking, does it deliver value to our customers? So begin with your assumptions and what you believe your customers value. Then you can compare these beliefs with what customers actually are saying, find the differences, and go on to assess the results.
Everybody agree with that? And that makes a lot of sense, right? Okay, so now we're going to talk about everybody's favorite, gathering data for assessment. Everybody with me so far? I don't hear you snoring.
And like you said, Melanie, with the having them be a part of it, they make a commitment to it. They make a, and that's what makes it work. You know, if it's only one side doing everything, there's no relationship.
That's right. Yeah, and you have no buy-in, right? Because then it's your plan. It's sort of like even being a supervisor or anything else. I mean, you've got to get, if I just sit down and make goals for everybody in my department and they didn't have any input in those goals, there's no buy-in. You know, parenting is the same thing. You know, it goes back to, what is your individual mission, and then you sort of set up those goals. But I really like what you said, there were changes, so we can't just assume that.
I learned that really early on. Because you would need to revise your initial goal, because when you first come, it's purely employment. But as you get to know your client, you find out that it's not just employment. Sometimes it's childcare. Sometimes it's maybe a language barrier. So those things are not necessarily uncovered in the beginning. Sometimes it takes a while for them to pop up too. So.
And back to our topic of homeless population too. Even with you could easily make a lot of assumptions about what's important to a homeless person. But even within that population, very different priorities. If you really talk to them of what is of value to them, because some of their homeless families, their concerns are different than if it's somebody who, and some people choose to be homeless because they don't like the establishments that are available because they have to follow rules and things like that. But doesn't mean we're not going to help them. So what are their needs and how can we help them in whatever capacity? So it's ongoing. So we're going to talk about data collection. Page 26, it says here, we've been exploring one kind of data, which is qualitative data, that you secure from asking someone what they think is important. Qualitative data is primarily used when you want to find out the depth and breadth of an issue. It provides you with options, observations, and other rich, subtle information that you can't get in any other way. Qualitative data can be characterized as data that is presented in words. The simple hint is that qualitative has the letter L for words, okay? So qualitative data usually is captured through interviews, maybe through surveys, through observations, and through opinions, okay? And who to ask and how to ask is important, right? How do you determine who to ask? And are you only going to ask the clients questions if you really want to find out the needs? Because we talked about the two kinds of, we have a primary customer and a secondary customer, so it's important to know what's important to the secondary customer too, because that also influences what we do. And then we have quantitative data, this is demographic data. So how much or how many and what is the scope? So that's the numbers data. That's the stuff Colleen works with all the time. So this sometimes is a little bit more nebulous. It's not as tangible. Although, could surveys be tangible? You know, could be. Okay, so these are usually more demographic data. So it says here, who would you ask or how would you ask them? So how would you, how do you determine who you're going to ask to get information relevant to your programs? If you're doing an assessment, if you're going to go out and do an assessment, you want to find out what's
Well,
relevant.
can you talk to the woman's person?
Yeah. And like I was saying, like in the Head Start, they determine that need and do their assessment based on wait list, right? How many people, and so that helps them determine where those area needs are. Or the number of low-income elderlies or disabled may indicate, in a certain area, may indicate that a senior center is needed there. That there's a whole bunch of seniors that live in this area. So then you could make a determination that there should be some senior support services in the area. Why would you want the support services to be close to where the seniors are? Because that's where they live, and then the transportation might be an issue. So that's like Halima, Olu, and some of them, what they do is they actually provide a lot of those services right on their campus, right? So then the seniors don't have to go anywhere. Does that make sense? Okay. So identifying community resources. When establishing a community profile, it's not sufficient to assess only needs. It's important. An important aspect of the community assessment is identifying the resources that are currently available and being developed to address problems, needs in the community. So how do we determine that? Anybody have any ideas? How we determine the community resources?
To other agencies that are dealing with homelessness, see what kind of services they're using and what kinds of numbers they're using.
Right. Okay, so she's saying collaborate with other organizations that you know that are working with the homeless population. So again, like a homeless alliance, and that's exactly why a group like that was formed, so that everybody was coming together and combining resources instead of working in silos and duplicating efforts, so that we were working collectively. And then also a better support to the client too, because there may be a portion that we can do, but there may be something else that another organization can do. So identification of resources, you want to look for gaps in services. You want to look at unserved areas. You want to look if there's no services or not enough services. You want to look for others with the same mission and do collaboration, which is what Cassie was talking about. So, when we see gaps in services, I think that's sort of what our needs statement is saying, that there's gaps in services, right? So then I think the key would be, well, what are those gaps? Coming up with a list of those at some point in a collaborative situation, and then trying to figure out, I'm moving ahead of myself, but then eventually figure out, well, how are you going to get funds or how are you going to get resources to address those gaps, right? And then also, focusing on unserved areas or areas that have no services or not enough services. I think sometimes on our neighbor islands, Maui County and like Molokai and Lanai, they have a lot less resources than we have here. They're like a little mini cosm of Maui, but they don't have the capacity or the supportive services. So that's definitely a problem there. And then again, back to what Cassie said, looking for others with the same mission and collaborating with them. Because if you work with somebody that has a different mission, sometimes then you go back to that competing interest, right? But if you work with, they're collecting information all the time. we've also done it where we've had focus groups, where we've had clients come in and invite them in, and we brainstormed with them about services and things that are important to them and captured that. So that was a very good tool as well. But what are some things that you could think of that you might do if you were charged with gathering a needs assessment?
It would just depend on who we wanted it from. So if we wanted it from our kids, we would do it with the student. If we wanted it from our parents, we would have a family strengthening night and then have some kind of a, like these things, would have questions that we have the parents go on and just.
Kind of like a breakout session.
Yeah. And find out information. But it just depends on where we're getting our information from.
Good answers. What's the value of doing that event that she was talking about? About bringing the parents in, doing breakout
Creating a
sessions?
relationship.
Creating a relationship. So it strengthens the relationship between the program and parents, because sometimes the parent involvement is kind of a challenge as well. But it also, what does it do for the parents?
They become an advocate.
Become an advocate, what did you say? Educates them. And it empowers them, right? It makes them feel important because you took the time to ask them what's important to them, you know, and then how that's going to impact their children. And sometimes even the children and the parents have competing interests, particularly when they're teenagers, right?
Or just their views. A lot of times parents will think that their kids are perfect. Or, or that they're speaking, they have good communication with their kids. Well, survey the kids were laughing and they said, I'm not talking to my parents about this ever. It just shows that there obviously is a gap in that they think.
And so then what do you do with that data then? 'Cause that's kind of what we're going to be talking about next, you know. So you taking that data, so now you've got it, so it's good, you've got all this data, then it's like, what do you do with it? That's the question. So what do you,
So, one of the things is lack of communication. So we actually have in our curriculum little assignments that need to be done with the adult in the home. And they have to be 21 or over. And then the adult has to sign it and bring it back. So if it's every week, so that's at least conversation happening every week with the parents about the substance. Or sometimes the homework assignment is just about communication and relationships. So the conversation is there. So we're breaking that gap.
makes sense. So it says raw data on page 28. Raw data is not information, it must be analyzed before it becomes useful. So how does MEO analyze data? And that analyze the data that we collected that would enable us to move forward. Does anybody have any idea of how we analyze data?
Looking for funding.
Well, we take all of these needs and then we sit down and then have it, what's the tool that we use to analyze it? So you were talking a little bit about when you get yours back, so that's what I was asking you. So what do you do then? You take that and you match it up to what the parents said and the kids said, right? So you're doing a physical analysis of that, right? And then you move forward, right? So raw data is not information. It has to be analyzed before it can be useful. Often agencies have identified a number of pressing issues and how they have to understand what the data is telling them. What's most important issue for an agency to address. So there's a couple of different ways that you can analyze data, and it tells you that on page 29. But here's some questions that you need to ask to help organize information. What are some of the root causes of the problem? Why should we be interested in the problem? What can be done to address the issue? Do we have control or partial control over the issue? Do we have the capabilities to address the issue? What programs can address the issue? What might we change in our agency that can help address the issue? And can we partner with someone to help address the issue? So I think once we've identified that there's a need, I think the point is we're not necessarily just going to go ahead and say, okay, we're going to take it on. We're going to ask ourselves these questions to analyze realize, is this something that we can really do? And I think the important question is there someone we can partner with, or is there somebody else already doing it, right? And if they're already doing that, do we want to partner with them, or do we want to just maybe, kind of bring it to their attention and have that be a part of what they're doing? So there are numerous methods to help you identify which issues in your community have risen to the top of the list, and ways to help you decide which needs you'll address. We previously did a quick prioritization activity in which we counted out the number of people who agreed on the stated need, and that was called the nominal group. So there's some other ways. Identify root causes. It's called the 5 whys, and then there's a force field analysis, there's comparison techniques, there's cause and effect, and there's trends analysis. So we're just going to kind of focus more on the 5 whys. So if you ask yourself, why does the problem occur, or how does the problem occur, and then, then you can kind of decide, how you're going to address that. So I'll give you an example. Using a transportation situation. So we said the problem is individuals do not have transportation to get to work. The causes might include that the individuals lack driver's license. Could be that individuals don't have funds to purchase or repair a private vehicle. The private autos don't need inspection. Individuals lack funds to pay for insurance, or individuals are able to pay for maintenance. So then, we would take a look at that and kind of try to determine, so what is the root cause of, why the individuals don't have transportation to work? Because it could be any of those, or it could be all of those, but you need to make that determination before you figure out how you're going to go, what your strategy is going to be. Otherwise, you're all over the place. Does that make sense? So on cause and effect, it says, to examine the relationship between cause and an identified need and the effect of the need, some use of geographic representation of issues. So here are steps to use this technique. Identify a priority issue to examine, brainstorm how it is linked to other related issues, and maybe draw a diagram of possible links between the issues. So that's kind of a visual way of how you can make that assessment. Kind of what I was just talking about, where we had all those bullets, but then you kind of use the process of eliminating which ones are not, which ones are the priorities.